more about President Trump's extraordinary message to Norway's prime minister over the weekend, in which Trump directly tied his campaign to take over Greenland to his failure to win a Nobel Peace Prize. CNN has obtained the text message chain in question, and it begins with a text from Norway's leader in which he writes in part, quote, "We believe we all should work to take this down and de-escalate. So much is happening around us where we need to stand together. We are proposing a call with you later today with both of us or separately. Give us a hint of what you prefer. Best, Alex and Jonas." Now, Alex referring there to the Finnish President Alexander Stubb. Well, President Trump replies, "Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars, plus I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace," he goes on to say, "I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland." Meanwhile, in a new interview with NBC, President Trump was asked if he would use force to seize Greenland. The president's response, no comment. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts. Congressman, a lot going on today, but let's start right there. President Trump continues to refuse to rule out using military force when it comes to obtaining Greenland. From your perspective, do you think that would be a red line for your Republican colleagues?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. I'm not going to speak for my Republican colleagues. For the last decade, they've repeatedly failed to speak truth to power and have repeatedly been cowed by the dear leader. But it certainly should be. I don't know how any member of Congress can read those text messages and not understand the imperative to speak for the United States as Congress and not let this president conduct foreign policy unilaterally. And what's not in those text messages is just as concerning as what is. You know, we see in there his fragile ego. We see in there his gross misunderstanding of NATO. But what we don't see in there is the influence of Russia. And this really needs to be investigated and interrogated. In 2019, the Russians ran a false flag operation in Greenland, trying to sow discord between Denmark, Greenland, and the United States. The Danish intelligence services uncovered that false flag operation. But now Donald Trump is doing what the Russian intelligence services never could, which is to say he is weakening the western flank of NATO while Russia is attacking its eastern flank. This is Russia through and through. And this president has repeatedly cowed to Vladimir Putin. Republicans in Congress need to be stronger.
Well, let's talk a little bit. I know you don't want to speak for your Republican colleagues, but frankly, even if some do decide to defect and try to check the president in any sort of way when it comes to this issue, is there anything that Congress can do to stop the president from, say, trying to take some sort of military action in Greenland? Because at least with Venezuela, it didn't seem like the president is accustomed to deferring to or asking for Congress's permission before doing something.
Yes, there is. There's not a lot of shades of gray here. The Constitution is super clear that while the president is commander-in-chief, it is within Congress's remit to both appropriate funds for the use of the military and to authorize any engagement with imminent hostilities. And Republicans in Congress have refused to act in Venezuela, even as this president has refused to rule out boots on the ground to serve as armed guards for oil extraction. But they absolutely could act with regards to Greenland, both by withholding appropriations for any military force in Greenland and by declaratively stating that there is no authorization for military force in Greenland whatsoever, as that would be an attack upon NATO. Absolutely, Congress could act tomorrow if this speaker would get off the sidelines and stop being the weakest leader in congressional history.
Well, it's interesting. We have heard some Republicans start to tiptoe in the direction Congressman Don Bacon saying on our air. And just on the weird chance that he's serious about invading Greenland, I want to let him know it would probably be the end of his presidency. Congressman, though, I want to ask you about the economic element here, because, of course, these tariffs have been threatened against many European nations. Some of the products that could potentially be increased in price for Americans could mean wine, beer, car parts, pharmaceuticals. Are your constituents able to handle something like that?
My constituents do not wake up in the morning and think that the biggest problem they have in their life is Denmark or Greenland or Canada. They think that the biggest challenge they have in their life is economic insecurity, particularly housing, healthcare, and utility bills. This president has repeatedly mismanaged the economy and then attempted to distract from that mismanagement with both military adventurism overseas and declarations of force against the American people themselves in Minnesota and beyond. I think the American public is awake to it. I think they're sick of it. I think they're going to send a message about it in the midterms.
Congressman, let's turn to Minnesota because I want to ask you about what we've been seeing when it comes to ICE on the ground there and their continuing tactics in cities like Minneapolis. Do you think ICE should be defunded after what you've seen over the past few weeks?
ICE needs to be reformed and retrained, and the gratuitous funding that was granted to it during the Medicaid cuts bill in 2025 needs to be taken back, because ICE should not be getting 10 times more funding than every other federal law enforcement agency combined, not at a time when the 29,000 unauthorized immigrants with murder or rape convictions have not been detained by ICE, but instead when they have been pursuing U.S. citizens and indiscriminately harassing both Americans and immigrant communities.
I'm curious, if Democrats are able to take back the House in the fall, from your perspective, do you think you or your caucus would want to impeach DHS Secretary Kristi Noem?
Well, I've already joined efforts to launch an inquiry into Secretary Noem for her failure of leadership that has allowed ICE to morph from an arm of the law into an instrument of fear. There needs to be accountability for that failure. She has consistently refused to give either American citizens or legal residents here the benefit of due process. Congress should show her what due process looks like through an impeachment inquiry.
All right, Congressman Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on a lot of important issues today. Appreciate it.